to my motto, nothing's ever holding back.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Lone Road iRacing podcast. I'm Guy Robertson and this week we're diving into something that might sting a little, but it might also unlock a lot of speed, consistency and sanity in your iRacing journey. Because today's question is simple. Not are you fast, not are you consistent, not even are you improving. But this, are you practicing wrong? Now that's a big question, and I include myself in this. I've been sim racing long enough to know that sometimes the biggest thing holding us back isn't talent, hardware or even time in the rig. It's the way we prepare when nobody is watching, because practice feels productive by default. Turning laps feels like progress. Sitting in the rig feels like commitment. But effort and improvement are not always the same thing. And the danger is this. You can spend weeks doing what feels like hard work, only to realise your results haven't moved at all. Same pace, same mistakes, same frustration. That's when that seed of doubt starts to creep in. You start questioning your ability, your equipment, and even your enjoyment of the sim. And often the truth is much simpler. You're not stuck, you're just practicing inefficiently. And the good news is the good news is this is one of the easiest things to fix. So today we're going to break this down in a really practical way. No fluff, no theory spirals, just real habits that either help or quietly sabotage your progress. So let's get into it. Let's start with the most common mistake in iRacing practice, hotlapping. You load into a test session, empty track, fresh tyres, perfect grip, no pressure, no unpredictability, just you and the circuit. And you start chasing the perfect lap. And don't get me wrong, hotlapping absolutely has value. It builds familiarity, it teaches rhythm, it helps you understand what the car is capable of in clean air. It sharpens muscle memory in a very controlled way, and it's very good for learning a new car or a new track. But here's the catch. Races are not hot laps. Now, I'm going to repeat that again. Races are not hot laps. In races, the environment is alive. It's fluid. Tyres fade, fuel loads shift, track rubber evolves, and guess what? Our focus fluctuates. And most importantly, other humans also exist in the same space as us. And yet, so many drivers build their entire confidence around an artificial environment that never ever truly exists in official sessions. Then race day arrives and suddenly the car feels heavier, the braking points feel a little vague, and that magical balance you had in testing has miraculously now vanished. And you're left wondering, what's changed? Nothing's actually changed, but the environment did. And that's the moment many drivers start doubting themselves unnecessarily. If you've ever thought, I swear this felt better in practice, that's usually the giveaway. You weren't preparing for racing, you were preparing for perfection. and perfection really survives turn 1. Now let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you practiced a full fuel run without resetting? When was the last time you intentionally drove in dirty air for multiple laps? When did you last simulate being boxed in on lap 1? Because these are some of the variables that decide results. Not ultimate pace, not theoretical speed, but practical survivability. One of the biggest turning points in my own iRacing results came when I stopped obsessing over lap time and started paying attention to repeatability. I stopped asking how fast can I go and started asking how often can I deliver. And that shift changed everything, because predictable drivers don't just finish more races, they finish calmer races. They make fewer emotional decisions, they manage traffic better, and they absorb pressure rather than reacting to it. And that's where the consistency is born. A really simple exercise that works wonders is doing uninterrupted runs. Set a timer, for example. No resets, no escape button if you make a mistake. Just keep crunching and managing the session as if it's real. Because races are messy, and improvement lives actually inside that mess. Practicing too much can also be a problem, and this one catches people off guard. Yes, there is such a thing as practicing too much. Not physically, mentally. There's a threshold where additional laps stop building skill and start actually eroding sharpness. And the tricky part is it doesn't feel obvious when you cross that line. At first, you just feel slightly slower, slightly heavier, slightly more irritable. Then mistakes start creeping in. Tiny ones at first, missing apexes by inches, braking a metre too late, overcorrecting X's that used to feel automatic. And because you care, you think you can push harder to fix it, which only compounds the fatigue even more. This is where diminishing returns quietly take over. Your brain is a processing engine. It needs downtime to catalogue patterns, to convert repetition into intuition. And without that downtime, everything stays in the conscious layer where it feels effortful and fragile. Some of my biggest breakthroughs in sim racing didn't happen mid-session, they happened the following day, after stepping away and reflecting on the day before. So don't underestimate rest as part of training. Ending a session early doesn't mean you're lazy. Sometimes it means you're actually disciplined. What about practicing without actually a goal? Here's another silent progress killer, practicing without intent. A lot of iRacers load in and just drive laps aimlessly. No focus, no structure, no defined outcome, and while that feels relaxed, it really produces meaningful growth. Because improvement loves specificity. You try saying that word, folks. Structured drivers tend to improve faster because every session answers a question. Am I refining braking points? Am I learning tyre behaviour? Am I working on throttle discipline? And am I stabilising Sector 3? Without that clarity, laps blur together. You finish a session unsure what you actually gained. and that ambiguity makes motivation over time. It makes it harder because progress you can't measure is progress you can't actually feel. A tiny change makes a massive difference. Before loading into the sim, I challenge you to define one objective. Just one. That single sentence transforms a casual drive into a deliberate training session. It narrows your attention, filters distractions, and makes that session meaningful. Intent is a multiplier. And the best part, guess what? It costs nothing. Ignoring starts. This is one of the most under-practiced areas in iRacing. Race starts. Last week's episode talked about lap 1 and the chaos, and we talk about that endlessly. But very few drivers actually train for it intentionally. They accept it as randomness rather than a skill. And yet lap 1 is where so many races are decided, not always won, but easily and very often lost, as we talked about last week. Cold tyres, packed grid, elevated heart rate, unpredictable braking points, yada yada yada. That cocktail creates pressure, and pressure exposes preparation gaps instantly. What's interesting is that drivers will spend hours polishing qualifying laps but almost zero time simulating realistic starts. That's when things get crowded and messy. Confidence disappears because the scenario feels unfamiliar. Familiarity breeds calm, and calm breeds control. One of the best methods I found is deliberately putting yourself in the midfield. Hosted races, AI sessions, even official races with a mindset shift. And don't chase pole, chase exposure. Learn the rhythm of compression zones. Learn how feels concertina. Learn how to anticipate chaos rather than react to it. Because once lap 1 stops feeling like a lottery, your entire iRacing experience changes. Now let's talk about something more psychological. Practicing while emotionally tilted. This one is subtle but incredibly destructive. You have a rough race. We all have them. Maybe someone wipes you out. Maybe you make a mistake you can't start replaying in your head. And the natural reaction is jump straight back in to reclaim control. But emotionally, you're not neutral. You're supercharged. And that energy shifts actually how you drive. You stop being curious. You start forcing outcomes. You chase redemption instead of learning. And suddenly practice becomes aggressive rather than exploratory. You brake later than you should. You overcommit to corners. You squeeze laps instead of shaping them. And because the results don't instantly improve, frustration deepens. It becomes a feedback loop. Some of the worst sessions I've ever had came from refusing to step away when I should have. How many of us think just one more race, and then it's another crap fest? You lose iRating and safety rating and wish you'd never stayed on the service. Calm minds absorb information. Frustrated minds reject it. So if you notice tension in your shoulders, irritation at tiny mistakes, or that internal pressure building, that's the cue. Stop, pause. Sometimes the fastest way forward is a temporary stop. Here's a tough truth that most drivers don't love hearing. You are your most valuable coaching resource. And yet most iRacers almost never review their own driving objectively. They're happy with fast YouTubers and they'll watch them all day. They'll analyse esports racers, they'll absorb tips from elite drivers, but when it comes to studying themselves, they skip it. And that's where the biggest opportunity actually lives, because your mistakes repeat in patterns. Humans are creatures of habit, and driving habits are no different. You'll often find the same corner causing issues repeatedly, the same braking inconsistency, the same throttle impatience. And until you see it clearly, you can't fix it deliberately. Replay review doesn't need to be complicated either. You don't need spreadsheets or telemetry overlays, just a calm, honest look. Watch lap 1, neutral mindset and no self-criticism, just observation. That distance creates awareness, and awareness unlocks precision. It's one of the simplest upgrades available to any iRacer, and almost nobody uses it consistently. So, viewers and listeners, we're going to have a short break, and we'll hear from the sponsor hotlap, and we'll be right back. We're having a quick pause here to mention our sponsor hotlap, who are supporting the podcast. Hotlap is built around the side of sim racing we don't talk about enough. The focus, the preparation, and mental work that happens long before the race actually starts. It's not about hype or loud designs, it's about process, patience, and showing up ready, whether that's in the rig or stepping away from it. If that side of sim racing resonates with you, you'll find hotlap quietly ticking along in the background. I want to thank hotlap again for sponsoring the podcast, and the link to their sim racing apparel store is in the show notes. Just a shout out for hotlap again. Thanks for sponsoring the podcast. And as you can see, I'm wearing one of their hats and their black foundation tee with the logos on the back as well. So find the link to the hotlap store in the show notes. Okay, back with the podcast. Here's another trap that feels comfortable but limits growth. Practicing only what you're already good at. And how many of us do that? Probably all of us to some degree. We naturally gravitate towards our strengths. It's just human nature. If you're strong under braking, you'll lean toward technical tracks. If you're smooth with flow circuits, you'll avoid stop-start layouts. Because it feels good to feel competent. It's another natural human feeling. But comfort really produces transformation. Your weaknesses hold the keys to your next leap, not your strengths. One of the biggest steps forward I've ever had came from deliberately choosing combinations I didn't actually enjoy. Tracks that exposed my flaws, cars that demanded patience, and environments that felt awkward. And at the time, I didn't enjoy it and it wasn't particularly fun. But it was actually incredibly effective. Growth often feels uncomfortable in the moment and obvious in hindsight. But it's worth asking yourself honestly, are you practicing to expand your skill set or are you practicing to protect your confidence? Because those two lead to very different futures. And the drivers who embrace discomfort early tend to accelerate much faster later. So when we zoom out and bring all of this together, what does good practice actually look like? It's not glamorous, it's not particularly extreme, and it's definitely not about endless hours. Better practice is structured, calm and intentional. It looks like shorter sessions with clear objectives. It looks like race simulations rather than perfection laps. It looks like stepping away when fatigue appears instead of grinding through it. It also looks honest. Honest self-review, honest acceptance of weaknesses, honest awareness of your emotional state. And perhaps most importantly, it looks sustainable. Because improvements in iRacing isn't a weekend project, it's a long road. And long roads reward smart pacing rather than brute effort. The beautiful thing is that none of this requires any extra talent. It doesn't demand expensive hardware upgrades. It doesn't rely on alien level reflexes. It simply asks for better structure, and structure compounds over time in powerful ways. Small adjustments now can reshape your entire season and seasons to come later. So we're going to have a very short break and we're back for the iRacing Agony Uncle section on today's podcast. We'll be right back. Right, let's finish today with our iRacing Agony Uncle segment. And this week's message is a really thoughtful one. A listener wrote in saying they're confused about iRacing reports. They're not sure when they should submit one and when they shouldn't. And they don't want to either overuse the system or ignore something they feel they should act upon. And honestly, this is a fantastic question because it touches something on a deeper level than just rules. It touches on community responsibility. So let's simplify it. The protest system in iRacing exists to protect the sporting code. Not emotions, not pride, and definitely not frustration. Its purpose is maintaining fairness and respect across the service. So when should you report someone? You should report behaviour that is clearly intentional or clearly violates the code of conduct. Things like intentional wrecking, retaliation after an incident, deliberate blocking or brake checking, abusive voice or text chat, and dangerous rejoins done recklessly and repeatedly. These aren't racing mistakes, these are all behavioural issues. Now, the flip side is just as important. When should you not report? You should not report normal racing incidents, and at times even the messy ones. Lap 1 pile-ups, misjudging braking zones, netcode contact, clumsy side-by-side errors. Because racing is imperfect by nature, and if every mistake became a protest, the system would just collapse under its own weight. Here's a really useful mental filter. Remove yourself emotionally from the incident and imagine watching it as a neutral steward with no skin in the game. Would you clearly see intent? Would you see chaos and human error? Intent here is the key word. Another helpful test is asking yourself this: am I trying to protect the community or process my frustration, because protest should always be rooted in the former. There's also a maturity element here. The longer you spend on the service, the more you realise that letting go of minor incidents is part of growing as a sim racer. Not every bump needs closure, and not every loss needs justice. Sometimes racing just hands you a rough moment, and learning to absorb those calmly is part of developing resilience. That said, don't swing too far the actual other way. If you generally see behaviour that undermines the integrity of the service, use the system. That's what it's there for. Respectful use keeps the ecosystem healthy. Think of it like this. Underreporting allows toxicity to grow. Overreporting dilutes the system's strength. The sweet spot is clarity. Calm decisions, clear intent, no heat. And if you approach protests with that mindset, you'll really regret the choices you make. So to the listener who sent that in, absolutely brilliant question. Because understanding when not to report is just as important as knowing when you should. And it shows you care about the bigger picture, not just individual racers. So please, listeners and viewers, get your questions into my mailbox. I want lots more so we can talk about them in the iRacing Agony Uncle section. Now to close today's podcast. So as we bring this one in and start winding things down, I'll leave you with a simple reflection. If your results feel stuck, if your improvement feels slower than it should, if races feel harder than your effort suggests, don't immediately look at your pace. Look at your process. Because very often the plateau isn't about ability, it's about approach. And the empowering part is this. Approach is adjustable. You don't need a new rig. You don't even need more hours. You don't need alien talent. Sometimes you just need a quieter, smarter way of preparing. Small tweaks, clear intent, and better emotional timing. And suddenly your progress starts moving again. If today's episode resonated with you, make sure you're following the podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you know someone grinding away without seeing results, send this their way. It might be the shift they didn't realise they needed. Thanks as always for being part of this journey. Thanks for the continued support. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care, and I'll see you on the track soon. Happy iRacing.
Whatever it takes, we're racing, we're in the zone. Whatever it takes, we push hard, never alone. I'm in the cockpit, the engines roar, hear me now. We're racing circles, got a hustle made a vow. Chasing victory, it's all or nothing on the track. Speed is my motto, nothing's ever holding back. Whatever it takes.